just when you thought it was safe to go onto iTunes. This is Next Level Guy, the only website that makes self-development as fun as going to the movies. It's time to take the red pill and escape the Matrix.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Next Level Guy Show podcast. Today's guest is Darya Rose. She's creator of the health upgrade website Summer Tomato. She holds a PhD in neuroscience and is the author of the awesome book Foodist. Today we discuss all things food and health related and how subtle changes to our approach to food can change our lives in such a dramatic way. But first, a quick word about our affiliates. Next Level Guy is in partnership with some awesome companies. To see the latest deals, special offers, and listener exclusives, please go to www.nextlevelguy.com/affiliates. That's www.nextlevelguy.com/affiliates. I particularly recommend you check out Alpha Brain by those great guys at onit.com and the Dollar Shave Club's great deal of an amazing shave for a few bucks. Simply click on the affiliates page on the site to see the latest deals and special discounts codes. And now to the interview.
Well, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to do this, but for people who are not aware of who you are, how would you say who you are and what you do?
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I'm Darya Rose. I am the author of Foodist, using real food and real science to lose weight without dieting. I also run a website, Summer Tomato, where it's my blog where I give advice on health and psychology and eating behaviors. And I also have a podcast called Foodist. And I'm a trained neuroscientist, so my background is in science. But I became fascinated with health and food through my own personal experiences with dieting and trying to lose weight at a young age as a young woman in Southern California. And I ended up solving the issue for myself, and now I help others do the same.
Well, I mean, that's something I really enjoyed about your website was your history of how you start to eat healthy, and I think it mimics a lot of people, and it's something that we struggle with, but because we eat daily, people just accept it. So should we really care about what we're eating, or is there more serious problems in what we eat?
Yeah, food is, you're right, like it's something, it's easy to take for granted, and I think that I certainly grew up with that understanding. It's weird, especially young people. I feel like we have this idea that sort of what we eat is just what we do, and we don't really think about it as something that's that important. But one of the things that I've really come to learn over the years is that it's actually tremendously important. And I had never, as a young person, I'd never put together that, if I have a stomach ache one day, or I have a headache one day, or I get the cold or a flu, that all of that is related to how I care for myself. And the single most fundamental thing you can do to care for yourself is what you fuel your body with. And I'm not of the belief that food should be viewed at 100% as fuel. I think that the idea that food can be pleasurable is also very important, but it's not so mysterious that how we feel is dependent upon what we put in our bodies, and making those connections is actually key to changing your behavior and doing it right, because you have to sort of feel that in your body, and when you start paying attention is when you can finally do that. And for instance, like when you feel yourself really well, you feel amazing. Like it's a hugely noticeable difference. And when you eat crap all the time and you've never eaten anything else, you don't realize how much better you could feel every single day of your life if you chose better food. So that's a big lesson that I had to learn, and I think a lot of people still need to learn. But it's hard unless you've experienced it. You can hear the intellectual arguments, but unless you've experienced what it feels like to eat great food, then it's hard to really believe until you do.
And is that something that you consider like one of the biggest issues that we face in this modern world? It's that, the quality of the food that people have become accustomed to, or is it more just their attitude towards it, or, we eat too much and obesity and things like that?
I mean, it's all part of the culture, and it is all, you can view it as a problem because I mean, the top 4 causes of death are directly related to food. And it's not just like you die, like you eat bad and then you die. It's like years and years of complications and sickness and obesity and fatigue and depression and treatments for diabetes and, soaring medical costs. I mean, it is, it's what you put in your body. It's how much of it you eat. It is your attitude. Like that all impacts how you decide to live your life. And, it's subtle. It's psychology. It's funny. It's like what I do now mainly is I focus on people's psychology because that's where behavior change starts. And if you just think to yourself, oh, I should eat vegetables because that's healthy and I want to be healthy, that rarely sticks. If you've tried it, you probably know. Like, it sounds good for a week or two, but the second you go on vacation or your kids get sick or something stressful happens, it all kind of goes out the window. And
oh, yes.
yeah. So that's not enough. But like you said, the culture that we have pushes us in that direction. Like the normal is poor food choices, overeating, and all that jazz. And so undoing that is not trivial. It takes concerted effort, and that's, where I try to help people.
So, I mean, I've seen a big difference in just how I feel and my motivation, my energy levels, etc. When I started eating healthy again compared to, when I started snacking more, working in an office job, etc. Can you go into a little bit about, what you consider real food and processed foods are? And, is it the way these foods are manufactured and harvested and treated with chemicals, or is it more what they put into them rather than how people are cooking them, etc.?
Really good question. So this is one of the great mysteries of nutrition science still. I mean, just to clarify what we're talking about, the science has shown, there's a lot of science out there. Like if you follow the health news, I mean, you're going to see headlines that just say the most outrageous things, and then 2 months later, you'll see the exact opposite headline. Like fat's bad for you, fat's good for you, sugar's the devil, sugar's fine, like all these things. And this vitamin prevents cancer. Actually, it causes cancer. And this has been happening for decades. And it's funny. It's like one of the things that has come up. So we don't have a lot of answers. I mean, we know that vitamin C prevents scurvy, and we have some rough ideas of how nutrition works in general. But one of the more compelling trends that has emerged from the science is that almost always, when the reason like something comes out as being really good is because they find like a population of people who's like eating in a specific way, and that, let's say that population in their diet happens to have a lot of vitamin E or some fiber or just something that, and they're like, oh, maybe that's the secret. And so what they'll do is they'll like isolate that vitamin and they'll stick it into like breakfast cereal, or they'll stick it in a vitamin pill, and they'll start giving it to people in clinical trials to think if it's going to make them healthy. And it turns out like it totally doesn't, or even does something bad. And then they're really confused. Like, oh, we thought antioxidants were good. All these people eat all these fruits and vegetables and they don't get cancer. And we thought it was because the antioxidants are sucking up the free radicals and preventing it. But then when you just give people antioxidants, they get more cancer. So what's going on here? Well, we've seen this pattern so many times in science. And what inevitably ends up being true is that the original source of the food is associated with good health. But the individual nutrients are a lot harder to pin down. And, one of the reasons for that is probably that a food is not a nutrient. A food is a dynamic system of living things that are working together in unison. And humans have evolved to eat foods, in certain combinations to get all of their nutrition. And so the benefits almost inevitably come from the food itself, the real food, something that grows out of earth or swims in the ocean or flies through the sky, real like animals and plants and minerals from the landscape. Whereas we have tried to create artificial versions of these in labs, and that's basically what processed food is. So there's processed crap food, which is just Twinkies and sugar and fat and salt that taste good. That's like we all know that's bad. but also
but nice to eat though.
Right. But like we're not pretending it's healthy.
Oh, no.
But the real thing that sort of is kind of amazing when you think about it is that these foods that are engineered to be healthy are actually not healthy either. And so all of those in my brain go into the category of processed food. So whether it's processed food just for enjoyment or processed food that's supposed to be healthy but actually isn't, like that whole category is of things that you should probably be avoiding. And you brought up an interesting point, which is that, well, what is it? Is it the processing? Is it the preservatives? Is it the isolated nutrients? The truth is we don't know. You know, we don't know why a tomato or an apple or a piece of spinach is so good and like has all these positive associations with it when you isolate any of those nutrients and put them in a power bar and it doesn't work the same. We don't have a good reason. It's probably a combination of all of the things. But the good news is that you don't need to understand all the science to choose the right thing. Right?
Yeah, I mean, that was something when I started going to the gym regularly, you know, people just said, if it comes in a box, don't eat it. You know, that was the sort of as simple as they put it, and it was a case of, if it's something your grandfather or great-grandfather could eat that, don't touch. You know, even avoid protein powders and things like that. You know, these sort of created chemically substances that were meant to mimic food, and it's amazing, as soon as I cut all that out and started eating properly, what a difference it made to just my general being, you know?
Yeah.
So for somebody who's listening to this, you know, unfortunately we've had such a rise in conditions like you mentioned, like diabetes and all sorts of other neurological diseases and health. And, you know, they're just listening to this, they're feeling tired and run down, but not ill as such. Is there a way that you'd start analysing somebody's diet to look for problems and eliminate issues? Or, you know, is that something that takes too long to do and you just get them starting eating healthier?
Yeah, really good question. First of all, I wanted to mention that I'm very impressed by the people at your gym. I mean, I live in New York, and everybody here is still pounding protein powder like it's nobody's business. So I'm impressed that your gym friends told you to avoid box foods and powders.
Well, that was one of them. The next one was over. Oh no, you need all these supplements. You need this. You need that. So.
But you're right. Like, and I used to be the same way. Like, I was a dieter, like a chronic dieter for a really long time, and I never ate bad. Like, I never ate sugary, fatty foods. Like, that was never the thing. But I ate lots of the protein bars and mixed diet shakes and powders and supplements, and I did all that stuff. And yeah, I weighed more. I felt terrible. I was always hungry. I was grumpy. I got sick every year. And when I switched to real food, not hungry anymore because I was eating more, and I stopped getting sick. My skin cleared up. My hair got all shiny. It was amazing. So how do you do it, right? Yeah, that's a really good question, because for a lot of people, that's a huge diet overhaul. I mean, that is a lot. It sounds overwhelming. And so that's where the psychology comes in, right? Because, you know, it'd be easy for me to say, oh, yeah, just totally do the 30-day plan and cut out all the junk and eat this way for 30 days, and you'll feel amazing. And you will. Like, that's true, if you can do it. You'll feel amazing for a very brief period of time until you go crashing back into your old habits.
You know me too well.
Most people can't do that. And even if you can, you set up this weird, even if you can do it for a duration of time, most people can't sustain it indefinitely. It's too hard and it's too restrictive, and it takes out too much of the joy in life. And our human psychology is not meant to handle like long-term deprivation like that. So, you know, I don't recommend that approach, even though I'm sure a bunch of people will try it anyway. Instead, what I recommend people do is really focus on one thing at a time to switch toward real food and act in activities, and ones that you love. So, you know, if you hate broccoli, I'm not saying stop what you're doing, stop eating fried chicken, and just start eating broccoli every night. Like, that's not going to work either. But there's got to be something you like. There's got to be, maybe you like fruit, maybe you like carrots, maybe whatever it is. And just try, start with breakfast, start with lunch, start with whatever's easiest for you and give it a try. Just add something in that's good. And, take it from there. And that's what I did. It's like I started with one thing. Like I just started cooking for me, because that was a big thing. I just realized that most of what I was eating was like in bar form or some sort of box, like you said, something in a box. And so I just started going to the market, like the farmer's market, and buying vegetables. And, when you buy them at the market and they're fresh and in season, they kind of are amazing by themselves. Like, it's nothing like going to the grocery store where everything's old and shipped from around the world. Like, this stuff was just fresh and delicious. I didn't have to do very much to it to taste good. And I even discovered after a while that things that I thought I didn't like I didn't like Brussels sprouts, I didn't like cucumbers, I didn't like eggplants. When I get those things fresh at the market, they're actually quite delicious. And, maybe not the first time I buy them every single time, but I have completely overhauled my whole taste preferences just by being open-minded and exploring and just going one day at a time. And, it takes a while, but, it's been 12 years now for me, something like that. And I haven't gone back yet. So, it's a slow and steady approach, focusing on things you enjoy and, just making it a fun journey. You have to like the journey. It has to be about the process and not about the goal. The goal will come.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great tip, because too many people want to run before they can walk, and just removing one thing at a time, that's really going to help. And I know what you mean about if you eat healthier or stuff that's just like, I grew up in the Highlands of Scotland, for instance, and to us, fresh fish was just off the boat, and I could really taste the difference when it's been frozen, etc. And we don't really have a farmer market here, but I now live in a big city in Scotland, and what a difference, you let the ingredients speak for themselves rather than the E numbers and the sugar, and
right.
What a difference it makes to you. Could you go into a little bit about then how that, food affects us physically, emotionally, and mentally? How does it cause these differences in the brain and the enzymes and things like that?
Really good question. So this is something that we don't know really at all. And it drives me batty. It just drives me nuts because, for instance, like I will see studies that somebody will say like, oh, like I actually saw somebody, I don't even want to reference this, but I'm going to, but I was so angry about this article that I didn't even share it with people to tell them I was angry about it, but I'm going to tell you about it now. It was basically this article that like lettuce was like super poor use of farmland because it didn't have very much nutrient density. And basically the only things that they were calculating were like vitamin, like A through D or whatever, like the basic vitamins. And that was it. And I'm like, we like the things that we consider vitamins, right, are not even close to a fraction of all the essential things that we need to survive, let alone thrive, right? Like when these vitamins were discovered, it was like, okay, you have vitamin C, you need that so you don't get scurvy. You need this vitamin so you don't have this problem. You need that vitamin. And those were super obvious problems. But nobody's testing, hey, if you don't eat enough of this, you might have depression. Nobody's saying, hey, if you have this in the morning, you can focus a little better for a couple more hours today. Nobody's saying if you eat this food or you avoid this food, you'll have a better workout at the gym, you'll like it better, or you'll have a better relationship with your husband, because you won't be so grumpy. These are things, or you won't get a cold. Like these things are all so subtle that they're actually, science isn't good at testing them, because we eat such a dynamic array of nutrients in our food and everybody's so different. Like that's another thing. We all have genetically different metabolisms to some extent. And so, maybe something that helps me a lot is not so good for you. Maybe you have a different genetic variation that, for an example, I have a gene that I discovered through a service called 23andMe that I can't digest. My body doesn't process folate same way like a normal person would. And it's not that common of a gene, but my husband has it too. A few people have it. It's called the MTFR nucleotide, SNP. And so what that means is that I need, if I'm going to like get the most of my folate, I need it to be methylated. So like I have to eat different forms of folate than maybe somebody else would. And God knows how that's impacting it, my brain or my body. You know, it's like that folate is such a critical vitamin in so many different processes in your brain. And do you know how many different types of neurons are in your brain and all the different crazy things they're doing? Like, how are we going to know how that impacts my life if I get enough of that nutrient?
I mean, it's scary. It's scary when you think about it, just that kind of, you know, little subtle things, you know, what causes colds, what can prevent a cold, what can make you feel better, you know, etc., to give you depression, you know, real food. And you think you're taking those out and just giving the very basic nutrients back in for the processed stuff. It's remarkable when you actually really stop and think about it.
Yeah. Right? It's completely crazy. And again, it's one of those things. It's like there's no study that can tell me how I feel differently, right? Like, what does that even mean? It's too subjective, you know. But I promise you, and like you're saying too, I feel a million times better in so many ways I can't even count. So yeah, it's really hard, and it's not science that way yet, but it's really powerful, and it is terrifying to think that we thought we were being smart by stripping out all the unquote unnecessary stuff and just putting in the basic vitamins that we know how they work.
That's our problem. We're trying to be too smart for our own goods, and you know, nature's providing us some amazing things, and we're messing with nature. You know,
exactly.
And do you see a trend? Is it Western societies that are eating too much and, you know, the crap? Is that true that the Eastern sort of societies are generally healthier and fitter than the Western societies and civilizations?
Sort of. The findings are typically that the more urban and the more you rely on processed foods, the more unhealthy you are. So in big cities, pretty much everywhere, you have the exact same problems.
Because we're getting more McDonald's and things like that out.
Right, exactly. But in more rural areas, you're going to, or anywhere that still relies more on traditional methods and cultures of eating is doing better, pretty much across the board.
Well, something I really enjoyed about your site was it made you look at food and actually consider food. It wasn't just something to eat while you're running between meetings. You know, you actually start thinking about the philosophy behind it and how it impacted you. And something I really enjoyed was the article about, are you hungry or is it something else? Can you just go into a little bit about how we can actually tell, first off, are we really hungry or is it something else that's maybe causing this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So this comes down to psychology again, because humans use food not just for fuel, in case you haven't noticed. Obviously, fuel is an important aspect of what food provides, but we eat for social reasons. We eat for pleasure reasons. We eat for convenience reasons. We eat for lots of reasons. And one of the things that has come up as a trend that I've seen a lot is people eat for emotional reasons. And specifically, people use food as an avoidance tactic, something to avoid anxiety or boredom or negative feelings. It's almost like you would compulsively drink alcohol or gamble or something like that. You've gone out of the realm of I need this sustenance or I want this sustenance to I'm going to like take this sustenance to fix a problem that's in my head. And it can be very tricky. You know, our subconscious, the psychology that drives the vast majority of our behavior, it doesn't like distinguish well between I want this because I'm hungry or I want this because I'm anxious and I have a long time habit of eating to cover up my my emotional problems, right? So becoming aware of that, like bringing that subconscious, because when you feel either one of those things, your body's just like eat, right? Like you just go into like eat mode. But in order to get to a place where you are no longer compulsively following an impulse that is not something you actually choose, but is sort of a reaction to something that you've been conditioned to over the years and maybe isn't serving you well anymore. In order to be more conscious of your choices and do the things that you actually want to do that are best for you, you have to literally be more conscious. And that means bringing awareness to the underlying causes of why you're eating. And this is hard for people, as you can imagine. First of all, it's by its nature, it's subconscious. You're not aware of it. So bringing awareness to your actions is hard as just by definition. But also, sometimes we don't want to see what's there. We don't want the reason we're avoiding it for a reason. Sometimes it's not as bad as we think, but sometimes it is something that scares us quite a bit. And that's something that needs to be addressed if you ever hope to change behavior. Like if you're finding that you compulsively eat or binge or emotionally eat, like this is something you're going to have to address in order to stop that problem.
And is it quite obvious the reasons for it, or is it quite complex?
No.
I knew that was going to be the answer.
Well, it depends. Sometimes it can be something pretty simple. Sometimes it just takes realizing not being busy, and this is actually a really common one. So we have sort of been conditioned now to like always have our phones and always be busy, always be consuming, and we get anxious if we aren't doing that. Like it feels like something's wrong. And some people, if they don't have anything to do, that anxious will make them so uncomfortable that they'll eat, and that takes the anxiousness away because, it literally just gives you something to do. And it's like sort of rewarding. And sometimes it's just, that's enough. You can just recognize like, oh, I just have like boredom, anxiousness. And and once you recognize it, you don't have to act on it anymore. You realize it's not a reason to panic, and that if you don't eat all those donuts, you'll be okay. But sometimes it's like, deeply ingrained, my mom made me hate myself type situation that's a lot harder to undo. So it depends, but the first step is always awareness, and it can either be something that's simple to solve or something that's a lot more complicated.
Now, imagine hypothetically we had somebody listening who just happens to be sitting in the same seat as me, and they've put on a few pounds, and they're starting to look at what they're eating, and they've noticed, they do routines of going to the same place, picking up the same meal deal that's full of sugar, and they pick up the snacks because they have the energy drop, after lunch, etc. How would you address that? I mean, I know you've got some great podcasts where you actually go through this with a client, but how should somebody start looking to lose weight and change their diet? Is it literally as simple as trying an apple instead of a biscuit, or how can we get over the sugar addiction? And
yeah, so good question. So this will depend a lot on the circumstances, but one of the things that I encourage people to do, like from the get-go, is look at your habits, kind of like what you're saying. Like if you notice you're sort of doing the same things over and over again, and by the way, we all do this, like we are creatures of habit. Take a look at those and notice patterns. Because sometimes, like especially if you're only talking about like 5, 10, 15 pounds, sometimes it's just one habit that can make that just disappear overnight if you just switch it up. And another thing is that a lot of the time that habit isn't something you particularly care about. It's not like you love that lunch so much. It's just that you happen to be at work and the place happens to be across the street and you happen to be a little lazy about it. You know what I mean? It's like it could easily be solved by just a little bit more foresight. So I encourage people to do something of like a 80-20 analysis of their food habits and their exercise habits for a week, right? And one of the places that is just a great target for stuff like that is just weekdays. When you think about it, if you're having lunch at work, that is not a special occasion. Like, you should not be eating something super indulgent every day at work. Like, it's not like you just need food. It should be as healthy as possible. It should taste good. You shouldn't hate it. And it should be satisfying, and it should get you through till dinner. But, like, that is such an easy target for just like if you can just fix lunch, like a lot of people you'll just lose 10 pounds in a few months. And you say you can do tricks like that. And sometimes it is as easy as just walking an extra block and getting the salad that you actually really like, but it was just an extra block, so you never thought about it before.
Yeah, because I can remember catching myself picking up the sandwich and the bottle of Coke and thinking, I don't really even like this anymore. It just tasted numb again. You weren't getting the same thing. It was just it's easy, it's cheap, it's right in front of me. It's like you said, it's the laziness of it. And do you recommend that people start like maybe prepping meals the night before, or just making enough at their dinner to do for their lunches, or when you're starting off with somebody who's got really bad habits, is it a case of saying still go buy your lunch but go to a shop that you actually want to try, or do you get them to start making their own dinners and stuff like that?
You hit on a lot of great possibilities. And the answer depends on the person. So, right, anything is better than the crap you're eating. Like we can start there.
You sound like
right?
my mom.
So, I mean, right. But if you start with that basic assumption, let's just assume you're going across the street and you're getting like some meal deal at McDonald's. So, like, anything is better than that. Just not getting the Coke is better than that, right? Like, you're cutting out 400 calories right there. So, or 300, whatever. So, I mean, view it that way. View any deviation from this is a win. So here's what I would tell people. If you like cooking dinner, if dinner's easy for you, cook extra the night before and bring it in. Great. If that works for you, awesome. If it's easier for you to keep going out but go somewhere different until you find something you like that, like, just as much but is going to make you feel better, is a little healthier, you can do that. You can even, like, another thing is that sometimes once a week, like if you feel like weird about like getting up in the morning and making your lunch, or making your lunch the night before and you don't have leftovers and there's no salad place that you like, just once a week, get up early and see, maybe 5 minutes early, and pack a lunch and see how that works for you. It doesn't have to be my way. It just needs to be better than what you're doing, and find something that works for you. And that's a really powerful reframe on how to change your behavior, because it's suddenly like really doable, right? It doesn't feel like, well, in order to lose weight, I have to, give up all sugar for this many months and all that stuff. It's like, no. Just do better and work from there, and you will see results, I promise you.
Yeah, because that's why I really liked your stuff, it wasn't a case of, nope, you have to stop everything right now, do it cold turkey, and fine well people would fail. You just gave straightforward advice going, instead of just going and buying a cookie and that because you're bored, maybe go for a walk, and it was just you actually got people to stop and really think about what they're doing, and it's something that we just, go, it's only dinner, it's only a bad lunch. But this is what actually, like you said, it's one of the four main, like the top 4 killers that we face in the modern world. So if somebody is listening to this right now, and what is something that they can do? What's your top 3 tips for improving their health?
Good question. So there's so many things. First of all, like you were saying, like it doesn't need to be this one thing. But one of the things that I definitely recommend frequently, because it is something that people don't think about, and I think that you really nailed it there, by the way, when you said that the issue is that people just don't think about it. Like if you have to bring some awareness to your behavior, and that's really the key. So one of the first things you can start is, so I don't like to start with removing things. So because that feels like a diet. It feels like deprivation. And when you're removing things, it doesn't feel as good. But what most people can do pretty effortlessly is just try to eat more vegetables. Just like try to eat more vegetables, like at dinner, at lunch, and make that a priority. And I would add a little caveat to that, which they should be ones you like. You should try to find vegetables, dishes, vegetables, specific types of vegetables that you enjoy, and just start working more of those into what you eat. And, eventually it'll start pushing out other things, and you won't be as hungry, and you'll start to like them more. You'll start craving them a little more. And it works really well. And it's not it's an ad, you know, it's a fun thing. It's an adventure. It's not something you have to give up. And starting there can be a really big one. I have a similar approach to physical activity, which I think is just as important for long-term health, being not being sedentary. So sedentary behavior is really, really bad, and that just means sort of sitting all day and moving around very little. And most people think, well, if I'm going to get in shape, I've got to go to the gym, and I've got to pump iron, and I've got to get all sweaty, I've got to have a special pair of clothes and shoes and a gym membership. Again, you're going too far, too fast. Start simple. Walk more. 10,000 steps a day gets thrown around a lot. That's a great goal. If you can do that, awesome. If you're walking 3,000 steps a day right now, try to get it to 4 or 5. You know, it's like you don't have to go all the way. And you'll see, like, taking walks is kind of nice. It's kind of lovely. Like, I don't know anybody who doesn't enjoy it. So, just start with little things and move toward vegetables, real food, being active, not sedentary. And I think you'll be amazed at how much of an impact it has. Most people think that's not enough, and they talk themselves out of doing anything, but it actually is. It actually makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I mean, I really like that idea of you're adding stuff to it. You're not taking things away, you know, because you get this idea that people have of they're being punished by going on a diet. They're being restricted in what they can eat, when in reality it's just you just choose better options. And is that why, do you think most of the readers and the clients you've worked with, is it mainly that they're just getting the food because it's easier? You know, are they making a choice to get the crap, or why aren't they cooking? Do they see it's too much hassle, or do they not enjoy cooking, or is there a standard kind of problems that you face with readers and clients and things like that?
Yeah, there's a lot of things and that come up regularly. Cooking is definitely has been a bottleneck for some people because it feels it feels hard. You know, people have a lot of beliefs around cooking, like, oh, I'm not a natural chef, I'm not good at it. You know, my grandma was good, but my mom never taught me, that sort of thing. Or it takes too much time. There's all this stuff. So yeah, that's definitely a factor, and I definitely work with people to get over stuff like that. But a lot of people, it's not so straightforward. So, I mean, I work with a lot of people who have tried a million things to be healthy, and they're still struggling. They're still overweight. They still binge eat. They still emotionally eat. So it's not that they are not willing or able to cook or eat healthy. It's that they've been the psychology has sort of gotten sticky for them in a way that it undermines their effort, and they end up, so they'll be good, like they'll be like too good. You know, they'll restrict themselves, and they'll do this, and they'll force themselves to eat salad with no dressing and things that aren't satisfying. And then, Saturday will come around and they'll find themselves like knee deep in a bag of cookies. And so that's a different problem. And so a lot of the work I do is getting people to undo the dieting mentality, to undo this idea that you can restrict yourself to health, and being more compassionate with themselves and allowing themselves to know that it's okay to eat food because you enjoy it, and that if you give up that restriction, you don't binge, or you don't go crazy by overdoing it, you actually become much more reasonable in how you're able to deal with sort of pleasureful foods that aren't necessarily the healthiest foods. And it's really hard for people to accept because it feels counterintuitive when you've lived in a world of restriction and binging for a long time. You feel like if you let the brakes off the restriction, you're just going to go nuts the other direction, which is your experience. But it's because you still believe in your minds that eating for pleasure is bad. And anyway, so yeah, there's a lot of deep psychology about why people struggle with this stuff. But in my experience, the I don't know how to eat healthy and I just don't want to is almost not as common as people trying too hard to be healthy and having it backfire in their face.
And is that how we can avoid the comfort food trap? Just avoid having a diet, basically, so you never need treats and cheat meals because you're never really, sort of punishing yourself, or the willpower is always there because you can always have a wee thing here and there? Or is it just looking at more about eliminating your limiting beliefs and mental blocks to food that really get you over that hurdle?
Yeah, there's not an easy answer, unfortunately. What you were hinting at is what I call like food moralizing, where you've set up categories in your mind of these foods are good and these foods are bad, and I'm good if I eat this way and I'm bad if I eat this way, but then if I've been good for a long time, then I deserve to be a little bad. And it sets up this push-pull of sort of a devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other shoulder, and they're always fighting. And that's...
I mean, I used to do that at the gym, you ate healthy for a week, and then on Saturday you were allowed a cheat meal. And before you knew it, Saturday and Sunday you were eating pizza and drinking Coke, and then you just start again on Monday, and it was just pointless. It never got you anywhere.
It never gets you anywhere. And that's the secret to undoing it, is realizing that it's pointless and that you're torturing yourself all week. And then actually most people don't even enjoy the binge because they overdo it so much they feel sick and they feel guilty. So it's like, you're not enjoying any of this. Like why are you doing this? And that is sort of when you realize that you're like just torturing yourself pointlessly, that's the secret to like wanting to try something new and being willing to maybe think that it's not such a great idea to demonize certain foods and to glorify certain foods. It's easier said than done, though.
It certainly is for me. I mean, and see if somebody's listening to this, how would you want them to start having the philosophy towards food? Is it just a case of, a fist size of carbs, a handful of veggies, and, say a protein each night, prep meals for going out later, or, is it becoming a bit more adventurous? Is there general rules that you set people that you work with?
Not usually. I mean, usually you have to meet someone where they are. So I'm not going to tell you to eat a certain amount of carbs or protein. I don't even use those words like micronutrients because they just confuse people, and they actually set up the good bad mentality. Right? Like, I have to do this. That's the good thing to do, and that means the other thing is the bad thing to do, and it just downward spiral from there. So, I mean, one of the first things I do is try to get people to stop being hungry. People one of the things that is a problem when they're like, quote, being good, is that they'll just like have a really small salad for lunch and they're starving by 4:00. And then they make bad decisions and they don't know why. I'm like, well, you're starving. Nobody makes good decisions when they're starving. So, and then getting really in touch with the values that you have around food. So most people are kind of the same. Like, we want to be healthy, we want to feel good, we want to have energy, and we want to enjoy social situations that involve food, which is like all social situations almost, right? So, but you have to come to terms with the fact that it's okay to eat things because they taste good, even if they're not, quote, healthy, right? Even if they have sugar in them and might spike your insulin. Like, you have to believe that that's okay to do sometimes, in order for it to also be okay to eat vegetables you like. Like, those are two things that like people struggle with. They're like, they have trouble believing that vegetables can ever taste good because they've set them up as like this virtuous thing, like going to church or something. And they set up, all sugar as it has to taste good. And none of that's true. It's like, I've had desserts that are absolutely disgusting. And I've had vegetables that are absolutely divine, that I would take over any junk food. And once you get into that category, where there's good versions of everything and bad versions of everything, and it's up to you to pick the ones that are worth it to you and have the quality, then it gets a lot easier. And so I encourage people to sort of reframe that whole picture and get some more nuance in there that's not just about health, and being good and being bad, because that is where you get into trouble.
So, say if we take it to the beginning and somebody's thinking, right, I'm going to improve my diet. they're going to go to the shop, how would you get them to start using things like farmers markets? And is there a way that they can construct their shopping list, or is it just a case of go out and try a bit of this and gradually improve it? Because this is where a lot of people fail: is they don't make a list, they go in when they're hungry and they just pick how they feel at the time, and they end up with like the bag of cookies and the chips and the all the comfort food. How can we shop better to start working towards being healthier?
Yeah, this is a good question. This is why habit journals can be really useful. So when we talked before about sort of taking a good look at the habits and the things you're doing all the time, if you're eating takeout every night after work, there's a really good chance that you don't necessarily love the takeout, but that you're tired and you're hungry and you just don't know what else to do. Right? So in cases like that, you come up with a plan. You're basically confronted with a planning issue. And if you don't know how to cook, that's an issue as well. So like you're either you can have a deficit in skills, or you can have a deficit in planning. And both of those things will you can't, I'm not going to tell you to go to the grocery store and buy like XYZ vegetables and go home and cook them on night. If you don't know how to cook, that's not going to do you any good, right? Like you're not going to do it when you're hungry and tired after work. You're just going to go do the thing you always do because you're not going to also learn how to cook that night. Like it's just not going to happen. So, you sort of have to figure out where you are again and go from there. So if you've never cooked in your life, try making a salad on a weekend. Salads don't require cooking. They don't require heat. They do take some it takes some thought to make them satisfying enough. So maybe maybe you have to learn to boil an egg, or maybe you need to buy some cheese or learn how to cook some rice or something to put in there so that it's satisfying enough. But you should not be doing that when you're tired and hungry after work, because you won't, and you'll just fail, and then you'll just feel bad. On weekends, you have a little bit more time. Try something. If you can cook a stir fry, but you only have like one recipe that you go to all the time, think of a new vegetable you've always wished you knew how to cook, just one, and like make that your weekend project. Like just buy that. Vegetables are like $2. Just do an experiment. It's not that hard. And take it from there and just do one at a time. And, you know where to start. Like, you know what you like. You know what you're willing to do. You know when you're tired, when you're not, when you have time, when you don't, what you can afford, what you can't, what you hate, what you like. Those are the things you should be factoring into your decision, because your goal is to form new habits. Your goal is to eat more vegetables, cook more at home, be more active, be less reliant on junk. I don't mind if you eat junk if it's a conscious choice. That's great. But you don't want to be reliant on it just because you don't have the skills and you haven't planned well enough. That's a bad reason. So that's what you're trying to avoid, and you do that one step at a time. You just put one foot in front of another until you have the skills and the planning down.
Yeah, that's a great answer. So that was something I was discussing with Kyle Ingham on the last podcast, was that we were the first society of men who are not really taught how to cook, and we don't have those kind of skills, and a lot of guys struggle because it's easier to pick up a phone than it is to take a chance to cook and possibly ruin a meal if you're tired and you want the food there and then. But I remember Tim Ferriss's book, I think it was 4 Hour Chef. He was saying about how you can, don't try to chop an onion when you're needing it for your dinner. Chop an onion when you're sitting watching a TV program, just to get into the skill. When it's you're removing the potential for it to go wrong and to fail. You're just
right, and also the panic of I'm hungry and I need to eat right now. You don't want to learn a new skill when you're starving.
As I found out, there's nothing nicer than a steak, but when you're trying to cut veg in a certain way and it's the pan's heating up and you're starving and it's not a good time to try to learn how to chop an onion in the proper way. Is that the kind of things that people just need to do? It's like, change their oil, look at how they're like throwing in extra veg and that, because I think that definitely works for me, is that little changes here and there, nothing major, And, if you don't like it, you just move on. You just do something else.
Right.
What sort of issues do you find that people complain about with the cooking? Is it just they don't know how to cook in general, or is it recipes and they don't know what vegetables to try and things like that?
Yeah, this was the bane of my existence for a long time. I was like, why won't people cook? Because I know, the people, so they're my readers. Obviously, some of them would, read my stuff and have tremendous success. They'd lose 50, 60 pounds, feel amazing. And then there were people who were still really struggling. And I noticed that a huge component of people who were having success versus people who weren't was whether or not they cooked at home. And so I was like, well, let's get to the bottom of this, because I cook and it doesn't seem that hard. So, what's going on here? And by the way, I was never taught to cook. I taught myself how to cook, and my mom never taught me or anything like that. And but for me, that sort of way of learning is sort of natural, but I have to teach that to people. So I'm talking, so I start interviewing all these people that aren't cooking regularly, and they had every reason under the sun not to cook. They didn't have time. Their kids won't eat it. They don't like it. I have people be very angry because it's they didn't want to have a woman's job, just a whole bunch of baggage around the kitchen. But it turned out, but the people who do cook, they don't have more time than you. They don't have more money than you. They're the same demographic of people. They've just figured out how to do it regularly. And so I interviewed them too. And it turns out that the main difference was whether or not people could cook without a recipe. Because recipes, if you don't really know how to cook and you're reliant on a recipe, it goes really slow. You're really inefficient, so it takes forever. Every time you want to cook a recipe, you have to go to the store and find whatever ingredients you're missing. And that's a pain in the butt. And then you make too much or you make too little, or it doesn't turn out quite right and you don't know how to fix it because you're not really a cook, or your kids won't eat it. And then you have leftovers that nobody will eat. And also, by the way, you have half an onion and half a bunch of carrots because you only use them for the one recipe, and there's all this extra, and then it rots in your fridge, so you feel like you're wasting money. There's all these issues. But if that's what happens when you just completely rely on recipes. But people who don't rely on recipes, they open their fridge I've got 4 carrots, half an onion, and they look through what they have, and they just whip something up, and they know how to make it taste good, and they'll taste it, and they're like, it needs lemon. They'll add lemon and they'll add a little salt and it'll taste amazing. And they can do that in 20 minutes. And I realized that this was a big thing for people. Actually, I have a whole program that I created to teach people how to cook without recipes. It's called Foodist Kitchen, if you're curious. But that's a serious issue. And it's just a skill you need to learn. And cooking, it's a little bit complex because it's maybe 8 skills. You need to know how to use a knife. You need to know how heat works. You need to know how things cook. You need to know how flavors pair together. But these are all totally learnable skills. They're not hard. You just have to go through the process of learning it. And really nobody ever teaches you how to do that unless you had a mom or grandma say, this is how you taste it and this is what it should taste like and this is what it should look like when the onion's brown. You don't know. So... yeah.
No, I completely agree. It's something I'm sort of learning just now, and I go one way for a while and I'm really good, and then experiment and I learn how to cook, and then other times I'm let's just get a takeaway. That's a lot safer. And I like that approach. It's just try it and build into it and stop trying to force yourself to follow recipes and instead experiment and and. What is the mindful meal challenge that you advertise on your website?
Oh, yeah. So, like we were talking about earlier, a huge part of behavior change is the fact that your brain is, when you're dealing with subconscious behaviors that sort of happen on autopilot, your brain isn't very good at realizing the reasons you're doing stuff. It can, if you ask you, if someone asks you why you're doing something, you'll give a reason, but it's kind of bullshit. You'll just give whatever reason, but usually it's more subtle and more complex, and there's a deeper reason for things that we do. And the number one most important step in undoing that and being able to change your behavior in a meaningful way is to first be aware of all those things that are going on in your head. And it's really hard to do because, like I told you, by the definition of being subconscious, you're not aware. Like, that's the definition of subconscious. So bringing awareness is difficult, but also essential. And the way you can do that is by practicing. And this is basically like what Buddhists have known for 3,000 years. And what meditators do is they're learning to become aware of when their brain goes on autopilot and then bringing it back to present moment. This is incredibly powerful around food, because so much of our eating happens automatically, fast, on autopilot, and we overeat, we make bad decisions. And so essentially I discovered over the many years of doing this, both with my own eating behavior and working with people, is that becoming a mindful eater, somebody who's aware of the eating process, and first of all, it makes you really enjoy your food more. Because when you're zoning out and you're reading a book or you're watching TV and you're eating, you're not tasting your food. I mean, barely, a little bit. But when you actually really focus in on what you're eating, it's a completely different experience. And you eat slower. You naturally eat less. You're satisfied more with the food that you do eat, even though there's less of it. You make better choices. It's really, really life-changing if you can do it, but it's a really hard skill to learn. So what I created was basically a free 5-day program to teach you how to do this. It's not like you'll do the program and then forever you'll be a mindful eater. It's just sort of like an introduction to mindful eating. But it takes you through why it's hard, how to do it, what issues are going to come up and how to deal with those. And, it's just a fun little thing. It starts Monday through Friday that I just created for people to learn that skill, because I just know how essential it is for people to, bring awareness to the eating process in order to make those behavior changes.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I immediately pounced on when I seen it, because we never actually pay attention to what we're eating. We're always doing something else, like on your phone or chatting, or you very rarely actually pay attention and actually taste what you've got in front of you. You're already thinking about the next 5-6 things that you've got to do. I know we're coming up to about an hour or so. Are you okay for a few more?
Sure.
Yeah. So now's the perfect time. It's just to get to know more about you. So this is the fast break questions. So I just throw out a prompt to you, and you just answer with whatever comes back into your mind.
Okay.
So it's things like, what's your favourite film?
Ghostbusters.
And the original, or is it the remake?
Oh yeah, the original.
Good choice. Because I always like these things, because we can talk about the aspects of it, but it's always good to get to know the guest, and there's some amazing surprises that come up.
Nobody's ever asked me that before.
I like to be weird. So what would you consider your favourite meal? What's your go-to, like something you either order in or cook? Because I noticed that you love to cook on your Instagram. Yeah,
I cook a lot. But like my favorite meal means so many different things because there's so many different contexts. But one of the things I just eat all the time it's cabbage and eggs. I saute cabbage with olive oil and then some soy sauce, and then scramble some eggs on there. And I eat it probably 3 or 4 times a week. And it sounds really horrible, but it's amazing and really satisfying and delicious. So there.
It wasn't what I was expecting after seeing some of the meals that you have, but each to their own.
It's so easy and it's so good, and it sounds so boring, but it's like I just eat it all the time because it's so awesome.
Your favorite podcast that's not your own, and I'm interested to see if you pick the one that Tim does with Kevin.
The random show? No, I that's fine. But I really do love Tim's show. It's probably my favorite podcast. I just think he does a really good job of answering or asking questions of really interesting people.
It's certainly something I'm working on. I still find myself answering a few of the boring questions, and I like the way Tim just kind of really deeply goes down in analysis of stuff you don't even think about, and I'm trying to become more like that, but Tim's something else. I really like the way him and Kevin just go off in complete tangents, and it's a great show. And I never thought that you'd be cooking behind the scenes while they were doing it. And
I usually am. Gosh, those two can eat, man.
Because you kind of you forget that there's life going on behind it. You know, and you've got toaster and like your dog. And
yeah, somebody's got to keep the house running. Once I kid you not, once after they filmed a random show at my house, I had just roasted a chicken, and these two men ate the entire thing like with their fingers, like picked it apart like by barbarians. It was really something to behold.
And how did the whole sort of randomness aspect of their show, how compare that to your scientific viewpoints? Do you and Tim ever butt heads in the way that you look at things, or do you quite like the sort of analysis aspects you both utilise?
That's funny. So Tim is actually a lot like me. Like, Tim's very analytical. The random stuff comes from Kevin. That's all my husband. And I actually really love that about him because we balance each other out really nicely.
No, I mean, it just from having a look through your social media and stuff, and you can actually see that strong bond there, and that's the kind of lifestyle. It's the experimentation and the doing things, and the dog is, that's for me. That was the ideal life.
Everybody loves Toaster.
he's a cutie, And what's the biggest food myth you wish would die?
The biggest food myth I wish would die.
Or
I really like just that there are like good foods and bad foods. Like that there's like foods that are good for you and bad for you. Like I think that just undoes so much of my work. I wish people would stop it.
And what was the strangest fact you learned during your PhD?
Oh gosh, the strangest fact.
Or something that every time you think about it, it just blows your mind.
I'm actually I'm gonna tell you something I learned way before my PhD, but it still blows my mind to this day, and it kind of has to do with food. Whenever I eat a mushroom, I remember that it's not a plant. Isn't that crazy? A mushroom is a fungus, and that is an entirely different kingdom of creatures. It's not a plant. A plant is different. An animal is different. A mineral is different. Those aren't creatures. But a mushroom is not a plant. They're completely different. Not a different species. Not a different genus. A different kingdom. It's trippy, man.
I bet because if you ask somebody that, they would immediately go, "No, it's a plant." Very few people would ever know that.
That's why I have to explain it, because I say it's not a plant, and people are just like, whatever. I'm like, no, shut up, listen. It's not a plant. It's not even related to a plant. They're completely different. They evolved completely separately. It's so cool. They have cell walls and a nucleus. That's weird. I forget why they're all different, but it's really cool.
And if I was to ask you what you're most proud of on your website, or is it your book, is it your podcast? What do you want people to check out first?
Ooh, good question. If you're starting from the beginning, you should read Foodist, my book. I'm very proud of it. I spent a lot of time on it, and it's not everything. You're going to come back and you're going to need the podcast and you're going to need the articles too. But if you're well, it's just this is. If you didn't get the hint from our conversation, this is a complex topic, because you're talking about nutrition, which we talked about for the first half of the show, super complicated, and then you're talking about human psychology. Complicated doesn't even begin to describe how messed up that is, right? So when you're integrating these two things, it's a lot. And almost every other, I've never really seen anyone else who does what I do in that way. So, there's a lot of nuance, and it's very complex. But Foodist is a great basic foundation of what I believe and how to go about it, and it's a blueprint, especially if you've ever dieted, if you've been a dieter. And then once you are ready for the more nuance and adding the complications to your own personal life, then Summer Tomato and the podcast Foodist is going to help you there.
And what's your take on shows like The Biggest Loser and these rapid diet shows and getting people to sprint when they're 300 plus pounds and morbidly obese? So
TV rots your brain. Stop watching it. Go outside. read a book. I don't like any TV. I loathe that show. I think it is cruel and unusual. I think it should be illegal. I think it's absolutely disgusting what they do to those people. They gain the weight back. Of course, they gain the weight. Can you imagine how heartbreaking? Like, I can't. It's so cruel, and they're using a method that is proven not to work. I mean, short term it works, but it makes these people less healthy and completely demoralizes them, and that they are profiting. That people want to watch this. These people suffer. It just makes me sick.
And they're not even fixing the fault. They're not fixing what's causing it. They're just fixing the result of it. They're not.
No, they're making it worse. Like they're making it worse by undermining their metabolism and undermining their psychology to never want to try again. It's freaking disgusting. I get very upset. No. Like they're not just not fixing the cause. They're not because they lose weight, but only for a year. Like it doesn't last. Mm-hmm. It's really horrible.
So I mean, what have you ever been approached to appear on a show like that, or how would you deal with somebody that's morbidly obese?
Those are two separate questions. I have been pitched for many shows, and I always say no. And with somebody, I mean, I work with people who are obese all the time, and you do it with compassion and with realistic things. You don't turn it into a spectacle for other people to gawk at. It's like everybody's got their own thing going on, and it shouldn't be a public circus.
No, because I feel like your approach would really help a lot of people, and it's a shame that we put that up as for fun rather than, people like you who actually can change people's lives.
Yeah. Well, my stuff is way too slow and boring to ever be on TV. And by the way, this is the reason I always say no to the shows, because they always want me to do something I don't believe in, because they want a quick fix, sound bite, and I'm like, I won't give you that. I don't believe it works.
Because that's the biggest problem. Is that it's a quick fix. It's not a full fix. Yeah. What's a guilty pleasure of yours?
I mean, my favorite indulgence always is wine. You can go really far with me with a nice bottle of champagne. So.
I'll remember that. And what's an unusual fact about yourself?
I did win the burping competition in 8th grade by reciting the alphabet backwards in a single belch.
Of all the things I thought you were going to say, that certainly was not one of them.
Good.
What would you like somebody listening to take from this interview? Is there something? What would you like them to remember most from this?
Don't diet. Never diet. It makes it worse, not better. It makes it harder, not easier. It'll backfire. You'll fail. Don't do it.
So you're not a fan of diets, then?
Nope.
And how can someone keep in touch with you?
SummerTomato.com. And the best thing to do is just sign up for my newsletter. It's once a week, and just get the best of Summer Tomato, and give you the run-through intro at the beginning, and just a weekly update from me.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you. I really cannot thank you enough for coming on. I really do enjoy your stuff, and it's really actually helped me start losing a bit of weight, and you start making me actually think more about what I'm eating, why I'm eating, and how I'm eating. The floor is open to you if you'd like to promote any products, any things you've got coming up, things for people to check out.
Yeah, well, I'm really happy to hear that my work has helped you, and thank you for having me. And I think we plugged everything already. I mean, if you're a podcast listener, you should definitely check out the Foodist podcast.
No, it's something I've certainly enjoyed, especially listening to the bodybuilder, who's
the recent one, yeah.
The name has completely lost me just now. I was only listening to it on the way home, and just listening to how some people, the way she was starving herself, and what a difference it made by just eating proper. It's amazing. Like, she did the same thing as me, waiting for the cheat meal, and then you explode, and then you have to start again, and it's a vicious circle.
Yeah. There's so many good lessons in the people I interview for my show. It's, they're real people, which is, it's really cool. It's really fun for me because it never gets bored because people have amazing ways of torturing themselves with food.
Well, thank you very much. I'm really appreciative of your time. And, I'll...
That's it for another week. Thanks for listening. Absorb it. Practice it. Use it. Until next time, keep trying to hit that next level in your life.